All right, here we are. Welcome back to Bookwave, the book club podcast. Today we're continuing our work through the Holy Bible book club and going through the book of Leviticus. I'm joined by Will as always. I'm your host Scott. If you're new around here, you can check us out at our website at www.bookwave.club. And I just want to start out this particular episode with a PSA to all the atheists out there, and maybe a few Christians who don't know this particular aspect, who don't know how to defend against the story of what kind of a God would manipulate Abraham into sacrificing his son Isaac. So, to begin in Leviticus, I just want to point out a couple lines that really stuck out to me. All right, here it is. And thou shalt not let any of thy seed pass through the fire to Molech, neither shalt thou profane the name of thy God. I am the Lord. So, I read that. I'm like, I have no idea what that means. What is Molech? Is this the part of the Bible that people talk about you shouldn't masturbate? Like,
That's what I thought too.
don't let your seed get wasted on the bonfire? Like, what's going on here? So I go to my computer, I Google it. My computer's doing an update. It's not working right now. So I just continue reading. But he pops up again. And he says, Again thou shalt say to the children of Israel, Whosoever he be of the children of Israel, or of the strangers that sojourn in Israel, that giveth any of his seed unto Molech, he shall surely be put to death, and the people of the land shall stone him with stones. And I will set my face against that man, and will cut him off from among his people, because he hath given his seed unto Molech, to defile my sanctuary, to profane my holy name. And if the people of the land do any ways hide their eyes from the man when he giveth his seed unto Molech, and kill him not, then I will set my face against that man, and against his family, and will cut him off, and all that go a whoring after him, to commit whoredom with Molech from among their people. So, you can't read that and not Google, what on earth does Molech mean? And then I reached a point in my research where I realized that everybody that Abraham was dealing with outside of his tribe worshipped these Semitic gods of Canaan, and Baal was basically the equivalent of Zeus. He was the king of their gods, and Molech translates directly in the Hebrew to king and shame, like the two words combined together, so they mark him as the king of shame. But they're actually referring to the Semitic god Baal, who demanded the firstborn be sacrificed from everybody. Everybody sacrifice your firstborn in order to be able to have more children afterwards. So when Abraham was told by Yahweh to sacrifice your kid, and then at the last minute he told him not to, that could be interpreted in two different ways. Abraham being manipulated by this all-knowing deity just for kicks, or Yahweh saying, I'm going to manipulate this guy just a little bit so he thinks that I'm in line with the gods of the land. His true intentions were. He wanted to put an end to child sacrifice, because if that happened today, it would be heinous and disgusting. Like, not too many people on the earth today are sacrificing their children. But in a land where in Egypt they're all sacrificing kids, in Canaan they're all sacrificing kids, Yahweh is the first one to say, hey, don't do that. So, the next time an atheist like me says something like, what do you say about the story of Abraham? Now you're equipped with the means to destroy their argument. So what do you have to say about
Yes,
that, Will?
That's very kind of you. Yeah, like you said, the first thing I thought was, oh, is this about masturbation? Because I had no idea who Moloch was, so I googled it right away because I didn't understand that passage, this whole passing seed through fire. But yeah, it was this practice of creating these giant sacrificial, I don't know, iron or stone things that you'd put a fire in and throw your child into and sacrifice to the god of
Yeah.
Moloch. And the next thing I wondered about was in Exodus when they take all the children from the homes of the Egyptians. What's the relationship there that the plague takes their firstborns? And so obviously this is like thematic throughout the text, is that the firstborns are getting sacrificed and it is a bad thing, and that's why God's doing it as a punishment. But if God isn't their God and traditionally they would have sacrificed their firstborn anyways, it confuses me. Like, I don't understand, is it even a bad thing, or is he just saving them some time and sacrificing their firstborn for them?
A part of me wonders if like that whole practice of sacrificing your firstborn was just to prevent overpopulation of some sort. Like, well, we physically can't feed this many people. We don't have birth control, so
Actually I've heard about some ancient Egyptian techniques of birth control involving like
oh,
solidified poop being shoved up the uterus. Probably clip that one from the video. um,
okay.
but yeah, so to that logic, yeah, if you have overpopulation and limited food supply, especially if there's droughts and famines and such, that makes sense. And then if you look at it through the filter of you're migrating and you are a tribe of nomadic people on a quest to get to your land, the first thing I'd be telling everybody is to stop killing your firstborns, especially if they're sons, because if
Yeah.
you're out there for 40 years and y'all have two kids in the first 2 years, by the time you roll up, you've got grown men and women, and they're ready to take on burdens and do things. So it makes sense. Like, if you're recolonizing your own population, you get rid of that right away and you bolster your numbers.
Yeah, and this is the chosen tribe, right? So God would obviously want these guys to overpopulate and the others to kind of thin their numbers on their own.
Well, absolutely. Like, the whole be fruitful and multiply thing kind of gets
Mm-hmm.
undermined if you're sacrificing your firstborns.
Yeah.
And especially what we know about the crusades that happen following this period of time, it absolutely makes sense. You need proselytes and you need to be prepared to go out and have men to spare.
Mm-hmm.
But that's so weird, because like that's such a militaristic move. And it's obviously the great migration of these people from Egypt to Canaan or Palestine or Jerusalem, whatever you want to call it,
Yeah.
has been the source of much debate for a couple thousand years. And it makes you wonder. So if you look at it through the premise of Moses is making all of this up, but he's very brilliant and he has a plan. Like, this is now a Napoleon figure who's commanding a large body of people and resources. They've just taken everything from Egypt. Like, he's thought this stuff out. But then to consider it as divine intervention, it just seems so punishing. And I guess that is what the God of the Old Testament is. But it's still just, I don't know, a bit of a smack in the face reading it.
Yeah, I kind of like to think of it as, I mean, you're all going to think this is heathenistic, but I like to think about it as Moses realizing that he knew how to get these people to Israel and to actually formulate the tribes, but he couldn't do it without, creating this god for them. Like, I need this symbol to give you the laws so it's not coming from an infallible human being like me.
And I think at that point in time, with just enough information about future events, you could be very influential to a group of people that up until this point are melting gold down and turning them into tiny statues of cows and worshiping at them and sacrificing their children. They seem gullible. Like, all you need is the weather forecast for tomorrow. If you can figure out how to predict when it's going to rain next, you can baffle these people. You can create a deity, and it is obvious that it's not the first deity being created. And so this is a marketing campaign. You have to have a brand, and you have to have tenets and philosophies and mottos, and it is something that when packaged right, you can convince the masses. And when your first 10 rules are don't kill anyone, don't sacrifice anyone, and don't worship anybody else, and follow my law to the T, you're setting yourself up to establish something that is rather permanent and will persist throughout generations.
Hmm.
And it's not like that was the last time that happened, right? Like,
Yeah.
religious groups are constantly creating religious groups and trying to make it so that they persist.
Absolutely. And it's just the structure that keeps it together, really. But there is one other line in Leviticus that really stood out to me. And that was when it told us not to eat bats. That's pretty good timing, I must say. Like, well, maybe if more people read this book, we wouldn't be in this situation.
Interesting too, because what I like to do as I'm reading it is talk about everything I'm reading, which really annoys my family members while we're in quarantine because all I'm talking about is the Bible.
Yeah.
But like, if a bat falls into a vessel of water, dump the water and break the vessel. Like, that's still good advice.
Absolutely.
If you spill dead corpses on your crops, raise your crops. Like, and a lot of the stuff that we get out of Leviticus in terms of quarantining individuals, in terms of cleaning individuals, and dealing with leprosy and health related issues, these are things that they understood based on really rugged trial and error experience that was proved hundreds, if not thousands of years later to be the most effective thing to deal with these things.
Mm-hmm.
It's interesting. Like, we get a lot of the like old school common sense knowledge. Like, this is its origin story, realistically. Like, good advice.
And we take that for granted a lot of the times. Like, I know a lot of people that wouldn't be able to tell you that the reason we cook pork at a certain temperature for a certain amount of time evolved from information that we got from the Bible. Like, it's ridiculous. Everything has an origin story. Even like the oral traditions that were collected and written down and put into the Bible itself, those had an origin story too that we don't even have access to. And this goes back to the core of the Sam Harris Jordan Peterson debate, where if you throw out the Bible and you just assume that everything in it has evolved into our current secular society, then you're obviously going to throw out something that's worth knowing. All these precursors can lead to other truths too.
100%. And it's that thing we were talking about last week, the system of systems. And this is an incredible textbook. This is a template for so many different things. Maybe you don't get a lot out of how to properly prepare your sacrifices like you learn in the first 10 books of Leviticus, but that does, and maybe it doesn't brush you the right way when it says not to sleep with mankind as you do womankind. But you have to take these things with a grain of salt, because again, if you just look at don't sleep with men as you sleep with women just for face value, and you tie that back into removing child sacrifices and going on a pilgrimage, the notion of not sleeping with men is to procreate, to bolster your numbers. And I think that if we were to be able to go back to that time period, you would see that much more as a political commandment than it was a moral commandment. Huh, what a statement to make.
Yeah, I think that's pretty controversial, but that's a really good point.
Yeah, I think that's really the answer that we'll never be able to confirm. But that's personally my opinion. When you say in the same book, don't sacrifice children and don't sleep with men, all my mind can do is say, okay, these are two related things to the same end, and that is build an army. Because when you roll up with 400,000 more people than the place that you're going to, it's pretty hard to lose that fight.
Yeah, that's another thing to remember too. These guys weren't all peaceful. They're fighting a war. And that they don't hide that fact in the Bible either. They're gonna need soldiers.
And it's one of those things where maybe it's time for certain groups of people to back off from stuff like that, because this book was written to be an answer to a context, and the context has shifted, and there's still a ton of value there, but I think that all of the value is devalued when you adhere to things that don't make sense.
Yeah. And Sam Harris, like I'm picking on Sam Harris because he's just the example that most Christians would point to as well, but Sam would never say we should get rid of Plato because we know he was wrong about what a person is. We know we're not just featherless bipeds. So we should get rid of Plato. We don't need him anymore. We know better than that guy. He still came up with the allegory of the cave. So that's all I really have to say about that.
I like his metaphor of the mighty beast that you guys completely missed that I had to ramble on about. But exactly, he's brought a lot of valuable debate and discussion to the table. Sure, he's brought some weird stuff with it, but everybody does. And I think the mindset that cancels other mindsets isn't aware of its own humanity. Because we haven't got to the New Testament, but let he who is without sin cast the first stone. Like, come on. If you really think that something's that terrible, maybe have a discussion with them and voice your opinion. Stand and face that thing. I just read this tweet today that says, if you had a problem with me, give me a call. If you don't have my number, you probably don't know me well enough to have a problem.
I like that. That also kind of makes me want to bring up another, just a little line that has come up already that I don't really know what it means exactly when God says they will be cut off from their people. Because that could mean a couple different things. Like, did they be cut off from their people mortally? Like, do we kill them? Do we exile them? Or do we just, spiritually damn them so they don't make it to the afterlife and don't find inner peace, kind of thing?
I think it's too hard to find an answer to that question. If you look at the way Orthodox Judaism works today, when you look at the prevalence of shunning still, I think that is literally what they're talking about, is being shunned. And when you look at historical information, you know that there are leper colonies, and you know that there are people that are exiled, and this isn't an unknown, unfamiliar concept. And I think it's just easier for them because, again, you have this commandment, thou shalt not kill. And he who kills shall certainly be killed. So you have to say, okay, well, God is exiling these people. And that makes sense. Because if you have a rabble-rouser in your community, it only takes one to make 100 defect. So you just have to tell them, look, if you cross the line, you don't get to share in the bounty of our traveling caravan. You don't get to come and sacrifice and have a chance at afterlife. You don't get to be holy in the eyes of God. You don't get to have a bed in this town because you are ruining what we're doing. You need to go. And that sentence in of itself is probably enough to deter the majority of people.
Mm-hmm. Perhaps it's just the ambiguity of it that's like, oh, cut off from our people. What does that mean? Better not mess with those laws.
It does sound weird though. Like when you're reading it, especially when he says, "I'll cut your soul off from the people." Like,
Yeah.
I don't know what that's about. And then you look at shoot, what's Moses' brother's name? Aaron.
Aaron. Yeah.
And his kids died at the
Yeah.
face of the tabernacle.
Yeah, that one was pretty wild.
I didn't understand that. And whenever something, for lack of a better term, that resonates with divine intervention happens, it's a big hang up for me in the story, because how the heck did they die in front of everyone? How are you telling me that everybody witnessed these two people just die because they got too close or they did something wrong?
Or just, what does it really mean? Because it doesn't exactly say that they were like doing the worst of the worst, that they were committing really heinous crimes. It's just they followed the rules incorrectly at one turn and then they burst into flames.
Yes, I don't understand how that would come about, and so I tend to just kind of look over that stuff. But in relation to that context is all of these sacrifices, and that I found pretty bizarre as well. The notion that this priesthood and this group of men in fancy robes that are jeweled up are eating everybody's meat. And every time there's a new priest, it's a week of eating everybody's meat. And it's not even like the wings or the legs, it's the shoulder and the rump. And that's the best part of the meat. And I don't understand how that fits in to the whole thing.
Yeah, I like the way they present it is just like when they're forced to sacrifice, it's either they're saying thank you or they're saying sorry kind of deal. So like in the instances where they're saying like, "Hey, I'm sorry," they're kind of like giving up all their meat, but when they're just like giving thanks or whatever, that kind of gets distributed among the rest of the people. That's what it kind of sounded like to me when I was reading it. I'm not sure. It's pretty convoluted.
Like, I don't understand why they need the meat, but I do understand the importance of them getting the meat. Because when you look at it from an objective point of view, you have an individual giving something up, and that is significant to the subconscious mind. If you're seeking forgiveness, or even if you're seeking gratitude, the rituals are the best way to appease the subconscious part of you that needs that feeling. When you do something on that scale, and when you involve the entire community and people of authority in that, and you get validated, it's incredibly powerful. And that is, there's no argument to it. We know this as truth. If you ritualize emotions, the emotions become more powerful and they resonate and stay longer because it's more impactful. That's why going to church on Sunday is good, because it's not going to church and kneeling before God for an hour. It's going to church, being in a community, getting a story, and getting a sense of camaraderie and community, and catching up with people and being involved in your life, in your world, in your town. And it sucks that as soon as you say, I'm an atheist, pretty much all rituals just fall off the table.
Yeah, I think that's the biggest thing that atheists like me are kind of lacking. But we also talked about this quite a bit when we read Art of War, because he talks about when an army is performing its best, it's when they're all united in the same spirit. They all believe the same thing. They all trust in victory. They all are adhering to the same general, the same gods, same religion. They're all on the same page. And that makes a community stronger, and it makes an army stronger. So I don't know if the ritual was just a tool created by Moses where he knew how to manipulate a large group of people for good instead of for evil. I hesitate to call it manipulation
Well,
because,
it's social engineering.
yeah.
That's the word for it. It's
Hmm.
not about manipulation or blackmail or guilt or shame. Well, maybe there's some guilt and shame involved, actually. But by and large, it's not about blackmailing people to do the right thing. It's about presenting the
Hmm.
argument that allows them to come to the conclusion that they ought to do the right thing. Whether or not the argument is based in falsities and fallacies is another thing entirely. But yeah, it's one of those things where people get hung up on it because it is. There's a lot of guilt and a lot of shame and a lot of obligation, and we haven't gotten to that place where you can just inspire good action in people.
Yeah, I think the Stoics came close, but, Christianity won that battle, so what does that mean?
Yeah.
Like I can
What are
still
you
read
gonna do?
Marcus Aurelius every day and base my philosophy and belief around that, but still a lot more Christians than Stoics, so how do we get the united spirit for all of us? That also makes me think that like the nature of the Bible itself has been so divisive for people in the 21st century. I wonder if that was engineered as part of the book. Like let's say this was actually written by God. We would have to assume that we would make it to the 21st century where Catholicism is not all of Christianity. Catholicism and Orthodox isn't even all of Christianity. You have however many different split up churches of Protestants, and every single one of them has key disagreements with the others. So, is that what God wanted? Did he want like a more libertarian structure where we all just do our own worship in our own little groups? Or did he want the entire world to be united in one Catholic Church under the Pope, under one supreme power?
It is a good argument to bring up, or even just a question to bring up, is if God is all seeing and all knowing and created everything, then why wouldn't he know what would happen 2,000 years later? He would. And then you have to ask the question, okay, so if he did know all of this was going to happen, and he saw the split coming, and they have this notion of the second coming in the New Testament, and they have a notion of the first coming still not happening yet, and everybody's saying no, like Jesus or the Son of God is coming at some point, and he's going to be the King of Kings, and he's going to clean up this mess. Like, how do you rationalize that? Because if Judeo Testament is the actuality, and that's the right religion, let's say that's the Word of God, the Torah and the oral tradition have been handed down, and this is right. Well, does God still want to kill everyone else?
Hmm. Yeah, then you have the question of who is the everybody else in the Bible? When sometimes just for fun, I like to watch Ancient Aliens and read stuff about the Book of Enoch and all those stuff about giants. And they make the argument that the Amalekites that the the Israelites are going to war with in the Old Testament, in the books of Moses, that they are actually Nephilim. They're the offspring of these fallen angels and humans, so they're giants and abominations onto the world. So they come up with this weird little argument that we shouldn't feel bad about the wars that the Israelites went through because they weren't going to war with human beings as we see them today. I don't know.
Right. And and then like you've got this notion that God created Adam and Eve, and from them came all of creation. And I just don't understand how that can happen. And then God turns around and said, the Egyptians aren't mine.
Yeah.
Like, that's a big fundamental flaw for me. If you created everyone, how is one race holier than the others? It's not. That's the answer. It's fundamentally incorrect to say that you created everyone in your own image and one group is better than the rest. That is a contradiction.
Yeah, but it's also a contradiction when they say God created the first two human beings, Adam and Eve. Then they had two children, Cain and Abel. Cain kills Abel, and then Cain goes off to live with the next village over. What's going on there?
Yeah.
Like, I seriously don't have a clue.
Yeah.
It almost makes sense to say that they're not humans when Cain interacts with them, because then when Seth comes along after the whole Cain kills Abel thing, and the rest of the characters in the Bible are all descended from Seth, like that's an easy thing to forget too. That like didn't stop at Cain and Abel. Seth was afterwards. Then came the line of Abraham and Noah, and then kills all the descendants of Cain. So
And you also have the story of the Tower of Babel and the dispersion, right?
yeah,
And it just leaves you asking a lot of questions. And I think that that's where I can't subscribe, because you very clearly have created all of existence, and now you're making some animals more equal than others. And that's just a trap. And the only way that a particular animal gets considered more equal than others is if that animal is the one saying that that's the truth.
oh, that was my favorite thing you've said in this podcast so far.
It's the best metaphor, honestly. Like,
uh,
y-
top tier
y-
reference.
if you have 100 ancient religions and each of them say that they're the chosen race, all I can say is that each race created that religion and called themselves special. Because if you were out to make a religion, you wouldn't call another race specialer than thou, and you wouldn't say that that race is supposed to kill you.
Yeah.
You could. There's certain mentalities that would want to do that, but I don't think that they would get to a position of influence to be able to get very far with that.
Yeah, that's where I think like maybe this theory about the complete libertarian Christianity might have some validity, because I don't know if you're familiar with Tom Holland at all, but he has this theory that atheism is basically just Christianity light, and we wouldn't have secularism or or atheism at all as a concept if it wasn't for Martin Luther and the birth of Protestantism. Because like you have to rebel against the church before you can rebel against the religion, and like most of the beliefs in there. Because when Luther nailed up his 95 treatises on the door of the church, all of a sudden everybody started creating their own different sects of Christianity. So fast forward a little bit, atheism is just another one of those. Like we pretty much inherited what we got from the Enlightenment philosophers. I like to point to Spinoza as a really good one, who said that the God of the Bible is just can be interpreted as the natural God, just the natural universe. And that's where a lot of current atheistic beliefs kind of stem from, even if they don't understand that Spinoza was the one that said that. That's kind of what they believe in the back of their head. And that's the part of the brain that fires up when they hear Jordan Peterson talk about acting as if God exists.
When you're writing the Bible, to say God told me all of this versus the universe told me all of this, because it's hard to say that the universe is talking to you, but if you're in a time period where everyone believes in gods, it's a lot easier to validate your universal logic through that sort of filter of God and divine communication. But the reality is, with insight, you can get messages from the universe. Like, if you look at the most simplest of things, like building a rock wall, rocks, they like to sit in one specific context. Anybody that's stacked a pile of rocks knows this. There's a good side, and that's where it wants to lie down. And God doesn't tell you how the rock is going to sit, and the universe doesn't tell you how the rock is going to sit, and the rock doesn't tell you how the rock is going to sit, and yet it does. And you set the rock down, and it looks right, and it feels good. And it's like I was describing the tabernacle and the layout of that. I think that if anybody with enough insight, short-term and long-term memory, maybe some journaling, did stuff for years and observed humanity, you could see the natural rhythm of the universe, and you could see that there was chaos, and you could see that a good way to create order was to say that God told me to do all these things, when realistically it's a Stoic philosophy or something along that thread, right? And it's odd, and it's not something that will probably happen again in the same way in this age without some sort of destruction of technology, because being able to communicate with 7 billion people this quickly makes it very hard. But that's just it. Like, the universe does speak to you. The universe sends things your way. The law of attraction is a thing. If you manifest crappy crap, you'll manifest crappy crap. If you want to manifest good stuff, you can do that. But it requires enlightenment and insight, and I don't think that was prevalent at the time, because we don't hear about the standardized education system of the pre-Christ era. So we've got sheep herders that maybe know how to count and talk, but they probably don't know how to write or read.
Yeah, and I think the kind of stuff you're thinking about is pretty evident in the language of people like Plato and the Stoics, because they use religious language like, grateful to the gods from the bottom of your heart. Marcus Aurelius. Yep. But it's hard to say if he's being thankful towards this collection of deities or this order in which the universe works that we can't fully understand until we just observe ourselves and know thyself.
I think that's why a lot of people say, you can't understand something without experiencing it. And that's why one of the arguments you hear from Christians is, look, you're not going to understand until you come to the church. And that's why you have conversions, is because people experience an incredibly great thing. And they want a part of it. They maybe have some hang-ups. But the reality is, when you exist in North America today, you're probably not a member of any clubs or groups if you're underprivileged or even at the bottom of the middle class. Like, you probably don't have a routine. You maybe, if you're lucky, you do a camping trip with your childhood friends, but a lot of people don't even have the childhood friends anymore. And so you jump into this environment and it feels good and it works because it's been tested on humans. Like, when you pray to God knowing that God will forgive your sins and you repent, your subconscious brain believes that it's okay now. And that's what matters. The fact that the subconscious brain responds so well to prayer is huge. And that's why singing in a group full of strangers in a church, it feels good, because these are things that we know feel good, and we didn't choose things that feel bad and wrap our religion around those things, because that wouldn't work.
Yeah. Absolutely right.
It's like when you get stuck visualizing how you think things will go, it stresses you out, because the subconscious mind is experiencing that, and it's saying, I'm experiencing this, which means I need to lose energy and I need to feel tired and I need to feel upset, or I need to gain energy and I need to feel energized and I need to feel good. And it doesn't matter what you're imagining, it does stuff. And if you're not aware of just how much power your own brain can have, you leave yourself open to attack from other people that do know how much it can do.
Yeah. That just sparked an idea. Like, maybe know thyself is a call to understand what your actual conscience is capable of, so you're protected from the dogma of, say, cults, so you don't, start to believe anything you're told. And a lot of people would argue that that's what religion does for people. It gives you the correct operating system so you don't buy into the cults of other people. But then there's the anti-theist argument that, well, all religions are just a cult where the cult leader died 2,000 years ago. which I do not support. I think there's a lot more to religion than that, but there's definitely some similarities.
Exactly. Like a cult is just a smaller version of religion. And obviously it comes with its own caveats and there's other factors at play. But at its bare bones, you have a group of people that believe similar things and then act on that philosophy. And that's cult, that's religion, that's culture, that's society, that's North America.
Yeah. The only difference, I think, is cults usually have a dictator at the top, and religions make that dictator God. So,
Yeah.
which I think can be really useful, because that's the same kind of idea that the American Constitution was built on. Don't, make anything infallible your symbol, because you know that it's going to fall out. You know the bottom is going to fall out from under it. That's the whole point behind modeling it after the Roman Republic. Don't give the president too much power. You need the Senate underneath him and all these checks and balances to make sure, everyone's taken care of and nobody is getting shafted. But there's a lot more to it than that religion thinks they have the entire answer, and I just disagree with that. Oh yeah.
What are you thinking?
There's one other part that I needed to bring up about the Day of Atonement. I don't really have much to say about it, but are you reading the King James version?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Then yours would have said that the Day of Atonement, when they release the goat into the wild and they call it the scapegoat.
Azazel?
Yeah,
what was his name? Azazel, yes.
It's a mistranslation.
I looked that up.
Yeah.
Mine actually had a note that scapegoat was translated from Azazel. So mine's highly detailed.
Nice. Yours is probably better than mine, but I'm getting a lot of this information from Asimov's Guide to the Bible, so.
Anytime a verse references a verse, it puts a note beside it and says what verse it's referencing.
So you got one of those really nice reference Bibles then, like a study Bible.
Yeah, I have a very good study Bible.
Mine's just a regular Holy Bible.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Mine's in the other room. I'd show you it, but black, leather bound, gold, Yeah.
Mine's white with gold lettering. I picked this one over the black one because it would match my copy of Jordan Peterson's 12 Rules for Life.
There is.
They look really nice on the bookshelf together.
Yeah, so what were you going to say? So I read a bunch about Azazel and the scapegoat and talking about the parallels between Jesus, the Lamb of God, being the one and final scapegoat for humanity's sins.
Yeah, well, I also read a lot about, some paganistic views of this particular passage, and Azazel, if many people are into the occult, has often been named a demon. So, like, the idea is that when they release these goats into the wild, the Greeks came up with the idea that they turned into these satyrs, like the half goat that stood up on two legs and played a little pan flute, like
Just tell
terrorizing
me.
humans. So, like, they actually came up with the idea that after the Day of Atonement, you're releasing a demon into the wild after sacrificing the other one for good. I don't know what that means.
That's odd. I feel like I had more context when I was reading it. Because Azazel dipped, right, from heaven, from what I understand. He
Yeah.
pieced out.
He's like one of the fallen angels that they talk about in the book of Enoch and other Gnostic texts. I think it was like people like Aleister Crowley that really
Mhm.
popularized those kind of ideas, like the ways of magic in the Old Testament and the New Testament. I really have to do some more research into all that Hebrew magic types of things.
Yeah, that's a rabbit hole. Like the Kabbalah, right? And
Hmm.
stuff like along that notion. As soon as you pick up a tarot deck, you find out just how much occultism has existed over the past 1,000, 2,000, three
Yeah.
thousand years.
I remember when I learned that our traditional, like, 52 card deck actually came from the tarot deck. That blew my mind. Like, what? We're playing a game based on, like, ritualistic magic? Okay. Didn't expect that one, but I like it.
Yeah, and that's a rabbit hole. We're not gonna go in there.
it just goes back to the old debate of, like, is meaning present in the universe, or do humans find their own meaning in the universe? And the way we're conditioned lets us see, you know, a Jack of Hearts as an evolved tarot card that means certain destruction and heartbreak. I don't know. The same with Urim and Thummim. Like, they lived in a world where if you pull a stone out of a pouch, that means something. That's not just chance. That's divination.
Interesting that like something like that got lost because it's such a useful tool for a human. Because the fact
Hmm.
is, you have three choices when you're presented with two choices. You can choose choice A, you can choose choice B, or you can ruminate about which choice to make. And I feel like that's one of the biggest pitfalls of the 21st century is that a lot of people choose choice C, which is to ruminate and not make a decision. And it at the end of the day, it doesn't matter what you choose. And so if you have a tool that gives you this binary output that says A or B, A or B, A or B, and you just go with it and you say, look, the universe has spoken to me, it removes so much anxiety and worry.
Yeah.
And just like if you got rid of all of religion and just gave everybody at the age of 18 a rock, two rocks, one black, one white, and said, this is it. This is what we were going to tell you when you grew up. There is no reality. It is just make a choice. Don't think about the choice, make a choice. And if in 10 years you've learned a whole bunch and gained a bunch of experiences and you're wondering how things would have gone with the other choice, choose that choice next. Do something and find out if you like it. Don't,
Yeah.
oh man, like, do I want to be a doctor, a lawyer, a politician? Well, those are all upper class wage earning jobs. It doesn't matter. Choose one.
I feel like that connects to the Marshall McLuhan quote that we were talking about in the last video, that the medium is the message. It's not which choice you make that matters. It's how you make the choice that matters. It's not what you do, it's how you do it.
And that just goes right back into know thyself.
Beautiful.
Like, and that's all I've been doing really for the past 7 years since dropping out of university. I think really was getting to know myself and the world that I live in, because I was so unprepared. I didn't understand what it meant to know thyself. I thought I knew myself. I now know I don't know.
Yeah. But is it better that we don't know ourselves, or that we think we know ourselves when it's really just what we might call a myth?
There's different philosophies that would answer that question, but the first
Yeah.
thing I think about is the bald guy in the Matrix in the first movie.
Yeah.
Who sells out everybody to the agents just so that he can get plugged back in, because he knows it's not real steak,
Yeah, he
but his
just wants
body
the
doesn't.
steak.
Yeah, like he knows what he wants and he goes after it, and he doesn't ruminate about anything, and he's a bad man objectively. But bad men exist and so do good men. Does it mean that because bad men exist they shouldn't, or that it's just a reality? And you get into some weird, murky philosophical territory with that.
Yeah. But you could argue against what we just said with that exact example. Like, he made his choice. He had a choice of taking the blue pill or the red pill. He chose blue right away. He was true to himself and he knew himself. So, like, I don't know if a blue pill red pill question is about character rather than just about, the kind of flavor of person that you are, the kind of personality that you have.
It's interesting. I think we could spend a bit more time on the red pill, blue pill parallel between Uman and Thurman. I still don't feel comfortable pronouncing those names. But yeah, like maybe choosing the red pill will give you the option to stand up taller and stronger and take on more responsibilities, and maybe the blue pill is the easy way out, but I think it's a lot deeper than that.
Yeah.
I don't think it's so much about who chooses the red pill and who chooses the blue pill, just the fact that there's a choice and you need to make choices.
And of course, the example that is rolling around in my head, and I know is rolling around in the head of any atheist watching this or listening to this, that, well, religion is the blue pill, secularity and free thinking is the red pill, but I don't think that's exactly the right answer either. I think there's a way
No.
that there's definitely atheists that have fully taken the blue pill. So,
Yeah, and I think there's pitfalls in choosing either. And I think the people that are in the camp of the red pill calling out at the camp of the blue pill are perfect examples of the pitfall.
yeah,
If your actions vindicate your arrogance or validate your arrogance, that isn't a good recipe, in my personal opinion. I don't think that you should be in the business of validating your own shortcomings.
yeah, and we see a perfect example of that with the red pill movement going on in the political stream these days. Like, oh, you liberals, don't you know that a liberal below 35 doesn't have a heart, a liberal above 35 doesn't have a brain? That's the line, isn't it? Something like that. So just grow up already, take the pill, join the conservatives, and learn the way the world really works. Like, that doesn't help anybody. In the same way that a Christian would say, don't you know that Jesus Christ is our Lord and Savior? And if you never come to church, you'll never have access to that great red pill that we have. Or an atheist saying, the red pill is letting go of religion and forsaking your Bible and realizing that we didn't start to think until the 18th century. So everyone there is wrong. And I don't know how to call these people out without acting like a jackass. But I think we should all strive to not only learn from other people, but to like fully express our own truth in a way that isn't condescending. And if you feel like you're about to offend someone, just be like, hey, I might offend you. I'm not exactly sorry, but this is just how I feel, and I'm being honest about it.
My intention in voicing my truth is not to offend. It is to express. And if when I express something to you that isn't a direct assault on your character, if it simply goes against what you think, if you get offended by that, you have a problem. And it has nothing to do with what we're talking about. And that's something completely separate that you need to seek help with.
Yeah.
That's all it comes down to.
I think there's also a problem of there's a lot of assumptions in the church. And all those assumptions lead to assumptions in what other people are trying to tell you. So when you try to raise the point of, hey, I have a problem with this little part of the Bible, I don't think he means this literally. And, someone who's really Catholic and believes every literal thing about the Bible would say, well, are you accusing me of going to hell then? You think I'm going to go to hell? And they get real defensive about it. So,
I think it has to do a lot with people thinking that they know where the conversation's going and just jumping down people's throats.
Yeah. You need to set your terms when you're having a conversation like the one we're having right now. You gotta be on the same page in one way or another.
Well, and that's just it. Like what we're doing, for me personally, is so valuable because I know that I don't have the answers. And I also know that there aren't enough guys in our age group and in our bracket in several different demographics. Tons of reasons we're similar, but they're not doing this enough. There isn't enough people having conversations in length that don't go anywhere and don't end with friendships ending.
And I think I know the reason why.
Yeah.
It's because people like you and me, we've been cut off from our people. Our tradition, I don't know about you, but I was pretty much atheist from the first time anyone tried to convince me that Noah's flood actually happened. I didn't grow up in a situation where people were talking about this. It's just my parents would say, oh yeah, we believe in God. God is real. You should pray and have a relationship with the Lord. But we don't go to church or anything like that. We don't do any of those silly things. We just do our own thing on our own. So the conflict in my head was you're either lying to me or you don't have the full picture and you don't know what you're talking about. So I'm just gonna go on my own direction and try to figure this out on my own. And, I got into a lot of atheistic philosophers that pretty much convinced me that there was nothing good in the Bible. Then people like Joseph Campbell, Jordan Peterson came along. I realized that, Star Wars, the most important story to me in my entire life, was directly inspired from the Bible. And, any other atheist might say, we have Star Wars. It evolved. The Bible don't need it anymore. Let's just use Star Wars. Let's start the Jedi religion. Let's start a religion that's unapologetically based on a fiction, because that's what we believe the Christians did. So let's just do that. But I've recently been learning that, all those people that I learned atheism from and my problems with the Bible from, they didn't really read the Bible that carefully. Case in point, why didn't anybody tell me who the hell Molech was?
Yeah, I think like for me, we did the church thing on a very inconsistent basis, probably until I was 12 or 13. I think really going into like grade 7 or 8 was when that whole we go to church thing completely stopped. And it was always, I knew I was agnostic. I didn't understand what the heck was going on. I enjoyed eating dinner with lots of people and getting tea and juice afterwards. I didn't feel comfortable talking to all the old people. The youth group was all people like that are now my age and younger, like mid-teens and stuff, and I was like the youngest kid, and it was one of those things where it was hard to get into. And then the Mormon missionaries came to our town, and they were really nice guys, and they played volleyball, and they went for bike rides and hung out and tried to sell their religion to us. I have the Book of Mormon. I think it's actually like right here. I never read it, and I again, like, so for me it was I haven't read the book. Why would I go to class? Like, I'm not caught up. I don't know what you're pitching. I don't know the entirety of it, and I wasn't prepared to do that reading. I really felt that human experience was more important, and I was in the business of burning bridges just to see what the fire felt like.
Yeah, I think we all fall into those kind of traps at one point or another, and it's valuable to learn from them too. But
Yeah, but
there's
that's
always
like,
something we miss out on in the end.
yeah, like especially if you're starting on an island and you burn all the bridges, you're gonna have to learn how to swim, and then you're gonna have to buy a bunch of wood and stone and rebar and build those bridges again. Because guess what? It's lonely out there and it's real windy.
But just think about how strong you would be afterwards. You've built bridges from the ground up. You've learned how to swim on your own. Like, that's
Oh,
pretty impressive.
absolutely.
That's
Like,
something that
and
never would have happened if you just walked across the bridge on your own and said, "All right, here I am, ready to be a Mormon." What is it you guys believe? Oh yeah, okay. Gotcha.
I actually remember them saying they don't drink alcohol, and I was like, okay, well, I'm immediately not interested in that. And I was like 12, right? I was like, I plan on
Yeah,
drinking when I'm older.
I plan on drinking tonight. What are you kidding? Are you kidding? I'm 12.
But it completely gone. I had a train there and it just derailed. Yeah, so like I've learned to swim and I've built my bridges, or at least I've started building bridges. I've got at least one good bridge built for sure. I must have a couple piers in. I don't know, but I wouldn't change it. There's some stuff I regret totally, but I think that that's good. I think a life without regrets is pointless. And
Yeah,
like I've failed forward for 7 years.
absolutely.
I'm at the point now where I wish I had been 15 years ago, and I think that if I had been there then, I don't know if I would have been alive today because I was already so self-righteous and cocksure. Like I would have killed myself. I would have gotten killed.
Yeah, this might sound like a religious statement, but I think our trials really come to us at the point when we're ready for them.
Yeah, well, exactly, and that's what I think we both agree is that the universe is random, and it's exactly how it's supposed to be.
Yeah, I like to talk about Darwin when talking about this specific point. That they talk about evolution and well, how did you just get a human being from nothing? Or like or not from nothing, but like random mutations? That doesn't sound right. But the mutations are random. We have proof of that there's plenty of artifacts in our human body that probably had uses before that don't anymore. Like the fact that fish have lungs, that's just weird. But um it's not the random mutations that project humanity forward. It's the selection process of those mutations that project humanity forward. And a lot of people misread Darwin when they say that we evolve completely randomly and we just get what we need. It's we have these random mutations, and then the mating selection process weeds out all the stuff that we don't like anymore. That's why, beautiful people have beautiful children.
Everybody talks about Darwinism as survival of the fittest, but I think
Yeah.
more accurately, it's the elimination of the weakest. And people miss that. They skim right over it because survival of the fittest was much better for branding and much better for business and competition and gamifying society at large. But it's a lot harder to be the fittest than it is to not be the weakest.
Yeah, I think that's where Ayn Rand makes her biggest mistake. She only cares about the strong instead of, the strongest 80%, for example.
Yeah, and it's like Jordan Peterson talks about, like if you could just spend all of your energy doing things that didn't set you back, let alone doing things that pushed you forward, like the capacity we have and the opportunity we have that we neglect because we're asleep, for lack of a better word, is awesome. And it sucks that, you know, in society today, people give up a lot quicker than I think they would have in the past. We were watching this movie at my wife's grandma's last week from like the 30s, and this guy gets his wife a guitar, and her first thing she says is, "I don't know how to play the guitar," and he says, "I don't think many people do when they first get one."
Yeah. Like
And it's like, go ahead.
that's the exact metaphor that I use for meditation. I'm like, hey man, meditation has been great for me. It could be good for you too. Why don't you try it out? Like, oh no, I can't meditate. I don't. My mind is always racing 90 miles an hour. I'm like, that's the point. You buy a guitar and you learn how to play guitar because you don't know how to play guitar. You learn to meditate and you practice meditation because you don't know how to clear your mind of all those thoughts that are, assaulting you day in, day out, and the only way you can get rid of them is another bong hit.
And to feel bored and uncomfortable. Like, people have lost their ability to be bored and uncomfortable. And the brain gets uncomfortable anytime it's doing something that it hasn't been doing this whole time. Which means it can get completely anxious just at the notion of brushing your teeth a third time in the day or eating some fruit and veggies. And it doesn't mean it's right. It's just a trigger. It literally is just a trigger, and you can act on that data or you can take that data into account. And I think a lot of people, I know for me especially, like, perfectionism was my undoing going through high school and elementary school. It was like, well, I'm not good at art, so I'm not going to do art. Like in grade 9 art, it was the last time I took art. I got a 50. I think maybe a 51 in art class. I did 2 projects in all the tests because I wasn't good at art. And I had learned at a young age that if you're not good at it, you shouldn't do it. And I was a kid who was good at math. And I knew I was good at math. So I focused on math, and I got 90s and 100s in math until a point where I stopped being good at math. And then it was game over, and I hit my brick wall, and I didn't know that you were supposed to build a door. I thought I had to turn around, and I'm glad I did. I think that perfectionism led to my journey, I guess. I lost my mind so that I could find it, that sort of thing.
Yeah. I can relate to that quite a bit. Just like, even as a amateur musician, I've definitely had points where I'm like, I'm not going to be Jimi Hendrix. What am I even trying for? But then, like you just have to commit to it. Like, I'm not gonna learn, Purple Haze front to back today. But what I am gonna learn is, an acoustic rendition of All Along the Watchtower. Let's start with that. An old Bob Dylan cover.
Yeah. It's weird. I wouldn't change a thing, but I would totally have done things differently.
Yeah. Even with writing too, like, that's been one of my hobbies that I've taken up really recently. But when I was in high school, I nearly failed every English class I took. Like, low 50s every single time, all 4 years.
I hated reading in high school. Every book I was told to read, I hated, and every book that I was forced to read that I've reread in this past year with you guys, I've loved. And it's
Yeah.
just like, how can we create a system that is so opposite to what is needed to teach teenagers and stick with it for so long? Like,
Yeah.
to the point that we're creating Adderall to fix the issue.
I think Plato and the old Greeks were onto something when they said we have to teach children philosophy. And here's another example from my high school experience. Precisely because I struggled so much in English class, they wouldn't let me take a philosophy class. They're like, "Nope, there's just no way that you could handle it. You're not smart enough. Your grades aren't high enough." Like for math, I was the same as you. Like high grades in math, machine shop, like music class, I wasn't that great because I was terrible at tuba and I had breathing problems. But
Tuba. Oh my
yeah, I
God.
actually had to change instruments from tuba to baritone because I just couldn't handle it. I didn't have the lung capacity. But I was like really good at like the music theory and the reading, and that's what got me through it because I was good at the mathematical aspects of it, and like that's the part of my brain that drove me towards philosophy. I was like already reading that kind of stuff on my own anyway. Like I didn't like any of the books that I read for English class, but I liked Orwell. So I wanted to learn more about socio-political things like that. I wanted to learn about religion, the arguments for and against it. But nope, they wouldn't let me take it because my English grades were too low. So there's got to be something in our school system that can be changed to alter that little aspect of it.
It's bizarre that I mean, I don't blame them. Like, what are you gonna do when you have to deal with people, right?
Yeah, in hindsight, like if I was a teacher and like I think this kid does drugs, um he, he's not very articulate. I don't think he would thrive in this environment. We should convince him to take another class instead. But at the time, I was devastated. I was like, I'm actually retarded. Okay. What am I going to be good at? I guess I'll start welding. I took more welding classes than any other kid in my year. Like straight up. Like for that exact reason. They convinced me that I would not be a smart person and the only way I could get through would be to become a cog in the machine of manufacturing.
Yeah, it's brutal what the school system does to the outliers, but you can't blame them. Like, I think
Yeah.
their duty is to give you the tools to realize where they failed in teaching you, and if you can understand that they didn't do a good job, then they've done a great job because now you have the tools to go and expand those areas of ignorance. But it's when you go through school thinking that the system is perfect and then you go through university and you realize it's completely different, and now like what you thought was going to be this perfect walk in the park is completely different. Like, I can't imagine the stress and anxiety of exam season, thinking that you were going to have like support 8 hours a day, right? Like university and high school are just completely different worlds.
Yeah, exactly. And I just take the Jocko Willink approach to it. Oh, they wouldn't let me take philosophy in high school? Good. I'll learn it on my own with people that I actually like to learn from, learn with. Oh, I didn't go to university? Good. I have more time to focus on my own path.
Yeah, I think it's important to be able to make those steps, but I don't see the opportunities to make them being prevalent. Like in the past 6 weeks of quarantine, it would have been so great to have more people to talk with and share these ideas with. but we didn't, going into the quarantine, have the tools in place to reach out to those people. Like, there is no Stoics club every week that I'm a part of. There probably is Stoics clubs, but I'm not aware of them, and that's my own problem. But like, you look at Scouts of America and Beavers and Timbit soccer and stuff that, like, these are the defined extracurricular movements for children, and then you get out of the children's stage and now you're trying to do pickup basketball with a bunch of old guys at the YMCA. Maybe you can get 2v2s going every now and then, but those things don't last. Like, I don't know. I feel like we need a different modality for how we've structured towns.
Yeah, it's almost like there's been a duality set in where you're either learning as an individual or learning as a collective, and there isn't much of an in between. Like, even if we did have, say, a Stoics club, we'd be reading Seneca, Marcus Aurelius, and Epictetus. There's not very many Stoics that they talk about in the Bible. Like, you and me might say that the book of Ecclesiastes is a perfect example of Stoicism. But, that's when the argument comes in. Oh, you want to let in the book of Ecclesiastes? Why don't we let in the Epicureans too? Why don't we let in anybody who knocks on the door? I'm like, yeah, there's got to be some kind of middle ground. There's got to be a way where we can come together as, Christians, agnostic, atheists, Stoics, all with different points of view, and argue our points, discuss our points, say where our own philosophies are strong and where our own philosophies are weak, and questions that we have. But instead, we have, a Baptist and an evangelical arguing that they're not the same church, when an atheist on the outside is like, I can't tell the difference. Like, you have people actually leaving Protestant churches for other Protestant churches. Like, how many different disagreements are you going to let get in the way of a strong, tight community? Because, yeah, it just doesn't work that way.
Exactly. Like, and that's the thing. The more strict you get with your system and the more questions you try to answer, the more opportunities there are to get hung up on. And you can't have it both ways. You can't say, look, if there's a conflict in a member of the community, the intention is to resolve the conflict. But if their conflict goes against what we all believe, then there's no conflict resolution. It's just not an option. We need to shun them. And it's like, okay, but how do we answer all those questions and stay inclusive? Because it's not about the answers to the questions. It's about being in a group of people with the same questions in mind and good intentions, right? Like, working together. And at a time like now where there's so much uncertainty about what is an essential job, and it's really easy to ask that question right now because of this quarantine. And like, everything is shifting in terms of the paradigm we experience, because we've got electric cars, we've got global warming, we've got this pandemic, social distancing, and the new normal. And the manufacturing industries got shut down. I don't think they're open. They're not making cars right now, and I don't know the last time they stopped making cars.
Yeah. Like, that's what the last Joe Rogan podcast was about with Elon Musk. Like,
oh, was it? I only watched the first like half hour.
I actually don't remember if they got into this specifically, but I remember there being a tweet storm right after where Elon is actually taking the state of California to court, because they said something about giving the green light back to manufacturers, and then they pulled back on it. And then some other states did put forward the green light to start manufacturing again. So Elon just put out a tweet that was like, all right, we're out of California. This is the last straw. Going to Texas or Nevada or something like that.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's wacky. Like you look at Shoppers Drug Marts and Tim Hortons and pretty much grocery stores. Like we are just a couple robots away from turning these department stores into walk-in vending machines.
Yeah.
Like then you have to say, okay, but well, what about student jobs? Because so many people want a job while they're in high school, and it's like, well, what if it's not important for you to be operating the banana stand? Like, why is it that the current paradigm says we need to work 40 hours a week? And how, with all this AI and robotics, are we not getting closer to a point in the conversation where people start to say, yeah, like humans aren't that good at doing jobs that robots do. We should probably just replace them with robots and come up with a new system. Because if there's a small group of people making robots, and then we get to a place where robots are making robots, so now no one's doing any work,
Yeah.
money becomes this weird question where it's like, okay, well, how do we make money? How do we live? How do we survive if we don't have a lack of resources? How do we monetize? And that's what we're coming to the end of now, where we don't really have needs. Like we have shelter and we have water and they're basic human rights. And there are advocates trying to make sure everyone has these basic human rights. And now you have people like Coca-Cola and Nike convincing you that you need to be refreshed and to be running on a pillow and all sorts of random stuff so they can make money and perpetuate their own existence when their existence is becoming futile.
Yeah, and I think these are really the questions that strengthen us, like the really hard ones that no one has a clear answer, like the 40-hour work week. Yeah, there was a good reason to implement that in the time that we did so. But now we really have to just ask the question. And it just boils down to the people that are afraid to ask the questions because someone's going to judge them for it. And it's the same kind of person that's afraid to ask the question in church. Like, if you're a devout Catholic and you just ask the question, well, what do you mean? Is this really the body and blood of Christ? Is it really the body and blood of Christ? Yes, it is. Well, I don't think it is. Well, good luck in a Protestant church, bud, because you're not welcome here. Like, that's the kind of attitude that I see as an atheist, where I know that I would never be welcome in that kind of environment because I believe all kinds of wacky stuff about the Bible.
And it's weird too because like as soon as you start to say, well, what if the 40-hour work week isn't what we need? Well, then you look at the education system, which was in a lot of ways a response to the 40-hour work week. It was your children are too young to work on the farm and you don't have the time, money, or energy to supervise them. Get them out, go send them to the schoolhouse so that you can get ready for harvest or get ready for winter or whatever it is, right? And now we have, like in Ontario, an online learning platform. And so the logical question is why? Why would we send kids back to school if they're getting everything online? And so maybe your first argument is, well, they need to be a part of a circle of kids. They need to grow up together. And it's like, okay, yeah, sure, that's totally a thing. I hear you. But homeschooling is not a new concept. And those
Yeah.
kids do have methods of interacting like Timbit soccer and karate and all of these different extracurriculars. And if
Yeah.
they can learn on Monday what takes them 5 days to get the material for at school, like why would we not be empowering this? Why do we have an infrastructure where we're keeping the lights on, where we're delivering gas and electricity and we're paying for that, and we have taxes that are being spent on that and subsidies that are being spent on that and administrators and teachers? And I'm not saying fire everyone, but I'm saying reinvent, transmogrify, and level up. Like let's get to the next stage.
Yeah. Like, the way I see it, I'm really thankful to figures like Martin Luther for the Protestant Reformation because without him, we wouldn't have the concept of the separation of church and state. But maybe there's another separation that has yet to come from that revolution, which is the separation of church and religion, or like, in better terms, community and religion. Like, I think we have to reach a point where we get our need for community from a different place that we get our need for religion. It's going to be difficult to figure out, where each individual is going to get their religion from. How is it going to pop up? And there needs to be like more systems in place that give people access to all the knowledge that is going to be necessary for them to have a standard view of it. Like, I think it's fundamentally a bad thing for people to grow up in a Protestant church and not understand the Catholic point of view. Like,
Yeah.
so me as an atheist, I've been trying to understand understand the Christian point of views and all the different Protestant churches, all the different like other world religions as well: Judaism, Catholicism, Islam, Hinduism, Buddhism, whatever. I think there's something from all of them that they can offer us.
Like for me, I don't even feel like I'm ready to be in the conversation, and that's my fault. I haven't read the Bible. I haven't read the Book of Mormon. I haven't read the Quran, but I intend to, and it's what I'm doing now. And I think that we need to create tools to expose people to these things and let them know it's okay to be educated in a time when you can learn anything. Like there has to be the standard issue curriculum to catch you up to the 21st century, but instead it's just this manufacturing assembly line to get kids into McDonald's and Magna or Ford, right?
Yeah. Like, we have the idea of Euclidean geometry in school, which kind of evolved over time. We've built on the ideas of Euclid, and we haven't let any of that go. Same with figures like Hippocrates and the art of medical science. But we don't do the same thing with philosophy. We just invent new kinds of philosophy. When you look at the Enlightenment, it's not like, okay, this guy had a point, here's what I have to say in support of that. It's, this guy is wrong in everything he said, here's why, and this is what I believe. You have all these individuals that aren't working together, try to put together a cohesive explanation of the universe. And it doesn't get them any farther than their actual lifetimes. That's the kind of stuff that built up communist Russia. Like Karl Marx thought he had the full plan. Hitler thought he had the final solution. It doesn't wash. And in the same way that Nietzsche was the favorite philosopher of Hitler and the Nazis, I don't think we should be ashamed to learn anything from Nietzsche just because of that fact. And that's what a lot of people, like in my camp, say about the Bible. Well, it says all this horrible thing about homosexual acts and how they should be stoned to death. I don't want anything to do with that book. It's horrible. Well, you could say the same thing about Nietzsche, but they all have their value.
Anything else from Leviticus you wanted to speak to?
I think we covered quite a bit of it, actually.
I think we did pretty good.
Just in our, rantings around some of the ideas of law, ritual, and the priesthood.
It's just it. Like, I'm not trying to tell our audience about Leviticus when we discuss Leviticus. I'm trying to talk to you about what it makes me think about. And we wouldn't have gotten to this conversation if we hadn't gotten this far in the Bible, I don't think. And, it provokes interesting dialogue. And I think what we're doing takes a lot of courage, because we know we don't have the answers, and we also know we probably don't even have all the questions.
No, like there's definitely a lot of philosophers that I need to dig into, and you know, every time I watch a YouTube video on philosophy, I think of a new question. Like, huh, how does that fit? Does it fit? Maybe. I'll have to find out. And like another thing just kind of in line with this is the priesthood of the book of Leviticus. All right, I referred in a previous video about like the 3 different documents that we get the Torah from today. And it's like the Judah document, the Ephraim document, and then there's like the priestly document, which is like it was made a few hundred years afterwards, and it's just like the combination of the 2 other documents plus the divine will of the priests themselves. But like the biggest clue in the book of Leviticus is that it tells us that the tribe of Levi is actually what makes up the priesthood. So you could also refer to the P document as the Levite document, some respect. But they were the ones that like polished it up. And then when they made the King James version that we're going through, they took from all 3 of those documents with, the same kind of thing, their own little priesthood, putting together what they thought would be the best translation.
Yeah.
And yeah, when like that's pretty much the most acute thing that we can say about Leviticus. Everything else is just, with any other book in this book club that we're reading too, it's not to talk about the book, it's to read the book and then talk about what it sparks within our minds. We're not debating the book of the Bible itself. We're just trying to figure out what it makes us question.
Honestly, it's just an exploration. It's
Yeah,
that's all it is. That's the only word to describe it. It's an exploration.
absolutely. I think that's a good place to end.
Yep.
Yep. It went longer than I expected, so till next time, remember to check us out at bookwave.club, and may the force be with you.
See you.